The title of the story is I Fucked Ann Coulter in the Ass, Hard. The farmer's market on Fairfax and 3rd is a Los Angeles landmark, attracting tourists and everyday Angelinos alike, as well as many famous faces. Among the celebrities I have seen there are Muhammad Ali, Terry Garr, Tyra Banks, Laura Linney, Keenan Ivory Wayans, the guitarist for The Cult, Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, and Weird Al Yankovic. But Ann Coulter is the only celebrity I've ever spotted at the farmer's market that I wound up fucking in the ass hard. It would be fair to observe that my feeling obligated to present a list of celebrities above in roughly black-white order is indicative of my own carefully liberal sensibilities, and that this is the sort of conscientiousness is more than a little ridiculous on examination. But what I notice about myself on reflection, Ann Coulter seemed to recognize and respond to in an instant, like a puma recognizes an injured gazelle. For Ann Coulter is a predator with a hungry asshole. I first spotted her sitting at a table in front of the gumbo pot, with another woman who looked not unlike her, but a generation older. I neglected to ask her at any point subsequently whether this had been in fact her mother. I vaguely recognized her, and there's always a lag time placing faces you know from cable when unconfined to a telescreen, and began to notice stealing furtive glances up from above the copy of Steinbeck I was reading, that she was eyeing me with unsettling scrutiny. The next thing I knew, her companion, mother, had left, and Coulter was standing over me, looking skeptically at my reading material. The Grapes of Wrath, huh? Yes, I said, faking composure. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic primer for vacuous proto-communists everywhere, she said dismissively. I don't know about that. She sighed. I don't have enough ink in my pen to keep a running list of what you don't know. May I? She motioned to the empty chair next to me. Of course. It would be fair to say my voice trembled a little. She sat and said nothing. Ann Coulter evidently takes an unappreciative view of small talk. That she was eager to continue antagonizing me became evident when I reopened my recently insulted book to resume reading. A young man passed in a t-shirt proclaiming Iraq Nam. She stopped him. Haircut. 2. Shower. 3. Get a job, you sniveling hippie, she glowered. You're probably too high to remember that, so write it down if you can write. He looked at her with dismay and scampered away like a kicked cat. She turned to me with bloodlust. What do you think of the war? Complete success or very nearly complete success? She asked. Well, in no time, barring the strong possibility of civil war, we'll have a democratically elected anti-U.S. Islamicist government in charge of the world's second largest oil reserves. So I'd have to say only very nearly on the complete success scale, at a hysterically distorted best. She showed her teeth. It sounds to me like you don't support our troops. I think that support our troops business is the most crass, craven cowardice ever to go unquestioned by the allegedly liberal media. Yes, there was oddly growing excitement in her voice. It allows the administration to absolve itself of responsibility for its own flawed policy. It's no different than if you sent a classroom of second graders into a burning building, and when anyone objects, you throw in their face that they don't support our second graders. Where do you live? A few blocks away. Take me there. When we get to my apartment, she looked around glumly. I was thinking you'd have half-burned American flags up on the wall, she said, disappointed. That's ridiculous. I love my country. Whatever you think that means, she said, rolling her eyes. Don't you have anything nasty to say about the president? Like what? Like he's an imbecile, or corrupt, or a corrupt imbecile. The usual sore loser bitter chatter. To be honest, I didn't like the nasty things that were said about Clinton, and I've decided to have respect for the office, no matter who holds it. I don't think President Bush is corrupt or an imbecile anyway. Would you like something to drink? I think maybe this was a mistake, she said, starting to go. That's not to say I don't disagree strongly with many of his policies and objectives. She seemed to reconsider. Like what? I don't know. Name one. Get me a drink first. With every point I expressed that ran counter to a view she held, she removed one article of clothing. Soon she sat on my couch naked, gently pulling at her untrimmed pubic hair, staring intently but not quite invitingly at me. The growing hard lump in my throat was just outpaced by the one in my pants. I was a little nervous because we had agreed on the last 2 points, for me to reconsider the option of nuclear energy and drilling in the Arctic, and I noticed her oversized nipples were no longer hard. Luckily, she was by this point determined. What do you think, she began provocatively, of the president's plan to privatize Social Security? I sighed with relief. This was as sure a promise to seal the deal as her asking if I had a condom. I think it's a payoff to the Americans. The president has always been most intent on pleasing the richest 1%. What do you mean, she cooed. I noticed her nipples hardening once more. She dropped to her knees in front of me. She pushed me backwards and positioned my legs up in the air. A stock's value is even now only partially tied to the actual value of any publicly traded company. But who's going to profit from inflated valuations when stock prices swell irrationally from the forced, artificial injection of capital? Her breath was hot on my taint as she lifted my scrotum. Yes, yes. You might as well shoehorn billions of dollars into the baseball card market. The price of a Derek Jeter rookie will be driven up by hundreds of thousands of dollars before the bubble bursts and the whole market crashes massively. It was getting hard to stay on point as she tongue-fucked my shitter vigorously. Don't stop, her contorted mouth pled for my butthole. The top 1% will sell stocks at the inflated valuations to the novice investors by necessity. The market will swell and crash, and the same 1% will come back and repurchase their holdings at pennies on the dollar. Meanwhile, Social Security will go bankrupt, and all the novice investors will be eating cat food for the duration of their golden years, barring a massive federal bailout several hundred times in excess of what the savings and loan scandal cost us. She sprung up on the couch on all fours and looked over her shoulder at me. She pointed to a twitching, puckered anus. See this? I nodded eagerly. I want you to wreck it. I sit on my skeezer-pleaser. I'm sorry.
Keep going.
I'm trying. Hold on.
Dude,
I'm getting into this.
I got a boner.
This cannot get better. I've never heard anything like ever this before.
Phrase, the skeezer-pleaser, that just has me in stitches.
What is that?
That's a new one to me.
You're welcome, everybody.
That was a new one to me as well.
Wow. Oh. That, okay. Is it a short story or a full novel?
It's a short story. Anyway, okay, sorry. Let me put some more here. Okay. I spit on my skeezer-pleaser, and prying her ass cheeks apart like a hot dinner roll, drove it home into the...
I think the game is how long can Cyrus go without laughing now?
I'm sorry.
You're doing the best you can, man.
I want this. You should really put a link for this onto the website.
A+ for try.
Okay.
I was not expecting the political, socio-political debate. Go.
I spit on my skeezer-pleaser, and prying her ass cheeks apart like a hot dinner roll, drove it home into the biggest brown eye I've ever seen. She gurgled contentedly. Every thrust of my baby maker was met with a wrenched squeal as I grabbed her by the hips and began really leaning into it. Harder, she begged. Harder. Tell me what you think of Chomsky. I think he's brilliant, but I don't really agree with much of his stance on Israel. And you're slowing down, she snapped. Don't slow down. I went back to punishing her asshole, giving no thought whatsoever to compassionate conservatism, as her chocolate socket gnawed on my pork pipe. She was babbling now as a sort of delirious reverie. Feed it, Ann Coulter rasped. Feed my hungry asshole. Feed my hungry asshole. That's awesome. Anyway, sorry. I buried her face in a throw pillow, and she swiveled her hips back on my fuck stick with obvious appreciation. My pace quickened as my man magma built towards eruption. Wait, she gasped, sensing the fuse on my yogurt cannon was burning quick. I want to take you ass to mouth. I withdrew from her pucker hole with an audible pop, and she scrambled around, gulping at my wang-dang doodle, as though the lives of all of her loved ones hinged on her marks for enthusiasm. Her eyes rolled up on my Magic Johnson. I knew what she wanted. There's a specter haunting Europe, I began, and she started to convulse spasmodically with her own thrashing orgasm, her head now dribbling in a blur against my groin. I repeated every Karl Marx quote I could think of until I reached my own historic God damn it! Sorry. I repeated every Karl Marx quote I could think of until I reached my own historic inevitability and launched surge after surge from my hairy Boda bag. I ejaculated with what seemed like enough force to blow out the back of her head, but her head was made of stronger stuff. She sputtered, gobbled, and gulped what I'd have to call a very liberal, even radically so, quantity of hot splooey. Once she caught her breath, she wiped her mouth, stood, and took me by the hand. Let's go to the bathroom. Why? She seemed surprised I had to ask. Her tone was that of someone reminding another of something too obvious to need mention. So I can get in the tub and you can piss all over me. I sat in a robe and watched her as she dressed. Will I see you again? I asked tentatively. Sure, she said, pointing to the TV. On that. Some moments passed. I tried to dispel the awkward silence. Well, nice meeting you, I offered. You've really got a gift for tedious small talk, she shot back. I was a little hurt, and recognizing this, she softened just a shade as she reached for her purse to leave. Hey. Yes, I asked. Thanks for not staring at my Adam's apple. No problem. She let herself out without another word, and I sat in the late afternoon silence alone. I considered how it felt to be a disposable instrument in someone's personal debasement fantasy. All in all, it didn't feel too bad.
Wow.
Beautiful, A+.
I don't know what to say.
That was fantabulous. You need to start a YouTube channel.
Wang dang doodle, huh?
There were way too many good euphemisms in that.
You were my favorite.
The fact that they had never existed prior.
As I reached my historic inevitability was my favorite.
That was fantastic.